Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the incredible engineering marvel that defined the battlefields of World War I, the most advanced tank of its time. This machine didn't just change warfare, it reshaped how nations thought about technology, mobility, and survival on the front lines. We'll explore what life was really like inside this steel beast, through a detailed look at its cross-section, crew experience, and the revolutionary design that made it stand out among early tanks. The First World War introduced horrors that no one had imagined before: trenches, machine guns, poison gas, and artillery that could level entire towns. Soldiers were trapped in stalemates that lasted months. Armies desperately needed something new, something that could break through the trenches and cross the deadly no-man's land. That's when the idea of the tank was born, and by 1917, a new generation of tanks appeared, stronger, faster, and more advanced than anything before. Inside these tanks, everything was designed for function, not comfort. The walls were made of thick steel, meant to protect the crew from small arms, fire, and shrapnel. But that same armor turned the inside into an oven. Temperatures could soar to unbearable levels as the engine roared just feet away from the men. The air was thick with exhaust, oil fumes, and sweat. Breathing was difficult, and communication almost impossible over the deafening noise of the machinery. In a cross-section of one of these tanks, like the British Mark V, often considered the most advanced of World War I, you can see how every inch was used to keep the machine fighting. The driver sat at the front, surrounded by gears and levers that controlled the tracks. Vision was limited to narrow slits cut into the armor, which made steering a nightmare. Even a small miscalculation could send the tank veering into a trench or shell hole. Behind the driver sat the commander, responsible for giving directions and coordinating the crew. He had to rely on shouting or tapping signals since radios were still primitive. Just a few feet away, the gunners worked in cramped compartments on either side. Each side housed a 6-pounder gun and machine guns aimed through ports in the armor. Reloading and firing these weapons while the tank bounced and shook across rough terrain was incredibly difficult. Every movement inside required teamwork. The crew had to shout above the roar of the engine, the clatter of tracks, and the thundering of enemy shells outside. Sometimes the heat became so unbearable that men fainted or suffered burns from touching the metal surfaces. There was no ventilation, and the smell of oil, sweat, and cordite filled the air. Yet, despite these conditions, they pressed on, knowing their mission could decide the outcome of an entire battle. At the center of the tank was its beating heart, the engine. In the Mark V, it was a 150-horsepower Ricardo engine. It provided just enough power to move the 30-ton steel monster at around 5 miles per hour. That might sound slow, but in the mud-filled battlefields of France, that was impressive. The engine drove the massive tracks that wrapped around the entire body, allowing the tank to climb over trenches and obstacles that would stop any other vehicle. Fuel tanks were placed dangerously close to the crew. One spark, one shell fragment, and the entire tank could turn into a fireball. There were no escape hatches in the early models. If a tank caught fire, the crew's fate was sealed inside. Later designs added small exits, but even then, escaping under enemy fire was nearly impossible. Many soldiers described their tanks as moving coffins. Despite all the danger, these machines gave soldiers hope. For the first time, there was something that could cross barbed wire and machine gun nests. Seeing a tank appear through the smoke sent fear through enemy lines. The German troops, who called them landships, often fled at the sight of one. The psychological effect was just as powerful as the physical destruction they caused. Inside the tank, life followed a strange rhythm. When the engine was on, the sound was deafening. When it stopped, silence was just as terrifying. It meant something had gone wrong. Maybe the engine had stalled, or worse, the tank had been hit. In those moments, the crew would hold their breath, waiting for the sound of enemy shells hitting closer and closer. Food and rest were luxuries. Missions could last for hours, sometimes days. Crews brought rations with them, but eating was nearly impossible in the stifling heat. The floor was often covered in oil, mud, and spent shell casings. Rats and insects thrived in the confined space, and yet the men inside formed an unbreakable bond. They depended on each other for survival, and every victory was a shared one. The cross-section of these tanks reveals more than just machinery, it shows human endurance. Every bolt, every gear, every weapon was part of a larger system designed to push through fear and chaos. Engineers continued to improve designs throughout the war, adding better armor, engines, and weapon placements. The Mark V introduced a new steering system that allowed one man to control the tank more easily, making it the most advanced and reliable tank of the Great War. By the end of World War I, the tank had proven itself as the future of warfare. The lessons learned from these early designs laid the foundation for the armored vehicles of World War II and beyond. But it all started with those cramped, noisy, suffocating interiors where courage met technology in its rawest form. Imagine sitting inside, surrounded by roaring metal and choking smoke, not knowing if the next shell would end it all. Yet, these men believed in what they were doing. They believed they were changing the course of history, and in many ways they did. Their bravery inside those early tanks paved the way for the modern armored divisions that dominate battlefields today. When we look at a cross-section of one of these machines, we're not just seeing steel and mechanics, we're seeing the story of innovation born from desperation, and the spirit of soldiers who refused to surrender to the impossible. The most advanced tank of World War I wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of progress, courage, and human determination under fire. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the history of World War I's most advanced tank, make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more fascinating insights into military technology and history. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the past that shaped our world.